Nothing. I guess I should do. I should do the show from like the. Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection.
I was just trying to remain perfectly silent so the viewers could experience the whole thing.
All right,
that's all. Well, it was a good bit, solid bit.
Like I thought, you doing like the whole like top that like face or nose down thing.
The mustache cam, yeah.
I should do eyes up.
Yeah, it should be hipster haircut cam for you.
There we go. But I didn't really have any like follow through joke on that because yeah, I don't know. I didn't plan that well enough. Anyway, welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host Connor Rebush, the much better prepared. Let me zoom into my mustache half of this group. And we're here to talk about UFC Austin, Cerrone, Cowboy versus Medeiros.
Okay, there we go. We had some internet lag. I don't know how much of this the viewers are seeing.
I bet they're getting a lot of it. Sorry, we've been having some lag problems. Hopefully nothing too bad. Hopefully it's picking up me at least, the important half.
Yeah, the unprepared half.
Anyway, we're here to talk about UFC Fight Night, UFC 126, UFC Fight Night 126 in Austin, Cerrone versus Medeiros, and this to me is a perfectly normal fine fight night card. It seems I get the feeling that it's gonna be one of those things that people are just like totally ignoring because everything that's not big is something people are totally ignoring right now. But this is to me right in line with every other good, fun, action-filled fight night card the UFC runs.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame people for not. I don't blame people for not giving a shit about everything that isn't big because that's kind of how fatigue works. You see, just like you see something that would have once seemed acceptable and now it seems utterly mediocre.
Yep.
But this is essentially UFC Fight Night subtitle. Are people watching Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series? Because this is basically where they're like, okay, all those guys that, even the ones that have been losing on that show, let's throw some of them in there and see. But I like that because the way they do matchmaking and scouting on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, what a catchy title that is like they find like 8-1, like semi-experienced, talented athletes.
They let what's his name? Shelby and Mick Maynard do the scouting for the show, and then Dana White watches the fights they've scouted rather than Dana White scouting it.
Right. It's basically just a UFC feeder league.
Yep.
On the nose, it is just the UFC matchmakers finding prospective UFC and then giving a chance before they're in the UFC to show what they've got. So it's a pretty good model for finding prospects. So most guys don't come out into the UFC to be solid, worth watching.
Yeah, and it's at the very least, because Dana White is the person he is and likes the kind of fighting he does. Yeah, it's kind of choppy and bad, isn't it? You catching up to me yet? No? Maybe you're not hearing any of this, are you? Okay. Connor dropped out. Hopefully we will be back with a little bit better connection here in a minute. Maybe Connor was the problem. All right, you're back. You're still frozen.
I'm in now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Boy, we are having some connection issues today. I don't know what the source of this is.
Definitely. Shit.
We should do the Cocoa Puffs lag test because there was about 10 seconds between the last thing I said and your response. We should do that. I'd rather have a bowl of
Cocoa Puffs.
Yeah, it was a little delayed for me. It wasn't quite in the rhythm of the song.
Anyway, what I was going to say before you dropped out is that Dana White liking the kind of fighters that he likes basically means that even the crappy fighters that they pull off of the Tuesday Night Contender Series are all going to be like dudes who are wild and unstructured and have no defense and will just like throw random spinning shit at any given time. So they're all fun to watch, even if they're terrible.
It's a pretty good model for entertainment, overall narrative aside, because you have matchmakers selecting quality talent, and then the promotion's president who just likes slobber knockers. And so you get the cross section of those two things is pretty nice.
Anyway, we're just going to dive straight into the bottom of this card this time and or right now. Move through it. There's a lot of fights I don't think we'll spend that much time on, even though I don't think that there are many fights on this card that will be boring at all. Like watching footage and getting ready for this is like, oh, these should all be fun. These are all well-booked fights. They're just fights between people nobody knows. So first up, Oscar Piechota, Tim Williams.
Well, the first matchup on our very solid LFA card is Piechota versus Tim Williams. Tim Williams, who I just said on Twitter, I think quite accurately looks like a face morph of Brian Stan and Joe Lozon. He's a scary looking dude. Tim Williams is fairly big as a middleweight. I think he's probably physically stronger than Oscar Piechota. That was something that stood out when Piechota fought Wilson. Doesn't look that athletic in really any sense. He's got good stamina, although really I think that comes down to the fact that he's a very good technical striker, and I don't think he freaks out or panics. I think he stays calm and breathes while he's working, and that's why his stamina looks good. He
paces himself really well.
Yeah. It was. I mean, and even in that fight, he came out fairly hot in the first round, and then had to slow down when it was clear that Wilson was going to put up a fight, and so he did have to pace himself. But that is his edge: is that he's a very technical, thoughtful kickboxer with actually a very solid wrestling and ground game to back that up.
He's a better grappler than he is anything else.
Right. Yeah. He comes across as a boxer because that's how all of his fights start. But he really surprises people with well-timed takedowns and floats really nicely in top position, transitions beautifully. It does feel like he's favored in this matchup. Tim Williams, I'm interested to see how his clash with Tim Williams in the wrestling and grappling goes, because Williams is a strong wrestler in the clinch. He seems very strong, and he is himself a pretty good takedown artist, especially against the cage. He tends to do a good job of using his head control to set up trips and twisting throws from that position. So if Piechota does not mind his footwork and gets pushed into the cage over and over, Williams is going to have a chance to wear him out and use what I think is a significant athletic advantage. But Williams is the one with the bad footwork. Williams is the one who tends to back up in straight lines, who doesn't tend to respond to strikes very well. So being that fights do start on the feet, I think Pichota's more technical striking is going to allow him to control the wrestling and grappling engagements and only engage in them on his terms. So I'm going with Piechota by decision or TKO.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure. Williams might be stronger, but I think he's also much slower.
For sure.
And so in ways that, like, in grappling exchanges, that'll be the big thing, is if Williams gets in and gets a body lock and takes Piechota down, can he just hold him down? Because Williams is a absolute bona fide grinder. That is his entire game, is just, if we're going to stay standing, I'm going to stick you on the fence and I'm going to grind you on the fence. If we're going to go to the ground, I'm going to get top control and I'm going to work one or two positions slowly for as long as I can. And if you make a big mistake, maybe I'll jump on something, but it's going to be slow. And Piechota he's not a grinder. He's slow paced, but that should just mean that Williams falls right into the kind of rhythm that Piechota prefers.
Yeah.
Especially as a very wooden striker, Williams tends to stand straight up and then just do that, like throw one long power shot and then stand, still, like stay stock still and everything online. It gets him hit really hard. His fight with Jay Silva, if you saw that, it was basically like 3 minutes of Tim Williams grinding on Jay Silva in one position or another, or almost submitting him in one position or another. and then Jay Silva scrambling up and beating the brakes off Williams until Williams could get another takedown.
Mm-hmm.
And Pichota should be able to do that. I mean, that was a smaller, weaker opponent as well.
Yeah.
Who was faster.
It really just depends on Pichota staying sharp. Because like there is something to the fact that Williams has this sort of methodical approach that it kind of surprises you when you like throw out a lazy kick and he's instantly in trying to get that takedown. He reacts in an instant despite how slow he kind of moves. But if Pichota just minds his P's and Q's, I think technique will win the day. And
what we saw out of Pichota in his last fight against Wilson was very much a I mind my P's and Q's fight.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, this guy's actually a lot stronger and faster than I expected, and I can't put him away right away. So I'm just going to stay on my back foot, try to make him overcommit, counter him, and then, jump on his back or jump to positions of strength whenever he opens anything up.
For sure. There's like a savvy veteran performance.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'll take Pichota as well. I think he probably gets the TKO at some point. He's got enough power in his hands, and he's good enough at being on his back foot in the counter in ways that Williams will drive through to try to get into the clinch and throwing like long single wooden shots that Pichota should be able to find a counter hook. Odds on the fight. Oh, come on. Pull up. Pichota is the favorite, opening at -285, jumping up to -262, and falling back slowly down to -289. Williams is the underdog, opening at +220, adjusting down to +213, and slowly sliding back up to +233. It's a little long, I think, just because Williams, if he is just strong enough to hold Pichota against the fence and hold him on the ground, he can make this a really close, ugly fight. But I would be pretty shocked if that happened.
Yeah, Pichota, I think, should be not a massive favorite, but a considerable one.
Yeah. Next up, welterweight bout: Alex Morono, Josh Burkman. Morono's probably going to knock Burkman out in the first round. That's about all I have to say about it. I mean, there's not a lot of prettiness to Morono's game. He fights in inconsistent bursts. He's not an amazing power puncher by any means. He's a pretty decent grappler. But Burkman either loses by not fighting at all, or more recently just gets overwhelmed in a minute and is done. So
yeah, it hasn't been that long since Burkman fought like a Paul Felder and survived, went the distance, and still looked like a shadow of his former self.
Fight at all, but can stay alive long by just staying on the outside and not fighting.
Right, a shadow of his former self, but you could still clearly make out Josh Burkman's outline in that shadow. And those last two fights, man, just getting mollywopped, like putting up no resistance, just getting rolled over instantly. And this is definitely a case of if you lose to this guy, it'll be your worst loss yet. It's definitely like Morono is a step down slightly, even from Drew Dober, I think. But Morono's
Zach Otto is actually his worst loss, and Zach Otto would probably be a worse loss than this.
Yeah, although for Josh Burkman, like Zach Otto is exactly the type of guy who will just pick away an easy decision against an inactive counterpuncher like Josh Burkman.
True.
Like stylistically, Morono is a kind of guy who would have given a younger Josh Burkman a lot of opportunities, like running in, offering up his chin. But now it's like it does seem like anybody who's game and who is willing to be aggressive and just go after Josh Burkman is going to have a lot of chances to put something on his chin. And
Burkman looks like he's in Gomi territory where I just would not functionally pick him against anyone on the roster. That's all there is to it. Anyone in the lightweight or welterweight divisions, I would pick to beat Josh Burkman right now.
Right. And Morono might be might end up being the worst loss yet, but Morono is not a bad fighter. He's kind of weird and sloppy, but he knows what he's doing. He does things with intent. with clear purpose. So I think Morono, like you said, is just going to run out and probably knock Josh Burkman out, and it'll make me very sad, but such is fighting life.
Yeah, Drew Dober made me very sad, or a bit sad. This will I just will be like, well, whatever. You signed up for it. I don't know. At some point,
you have removed yourself from responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's like Takanori Gomi keeping fighting. Like, it sucks and I hate it, but I don't know.
It's like even he has to know what to expect at this point, right?
Yeah. Morono opened at minus 235, adjusted up to minus 225, and is now at minus 276. Burkman opened at minus 190 and is basically slowly slid up to plus 190 rather, and it has slowly slid up to plus 224. I think those odds could just keep getting longer, frankly. I mean, Burkman would have to really show up in a way he has not in a while to win this fight.
Yeah, he would have to look like Josh Burkman again.
Yeah. I mean, Josh Burkman, we're talking Josh Burkman who beat John Fitch in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Not even Tyler Stinson or KJ Noon's Josh Burkman.
The one who got knocked out by Patrick Cote would have a pretty good chance of knocking Alex Morono out, but still might lose to him. The one who got flattened easily by Drew Dober, doesn't feel good.
The one who beat KJ Noons would lose to Alex Morono.
God, remember that fight? We did that one on the Depressed, right?
We did.
Okay.
All right. That brings us to a women's bantamweight bout. Sarah Moras, Lucie Pudilová.
I don't know. I kind of hate this matchup. Trying to pick it. It's a weird clash of styles. Sarah Moras doesn't really do anything except jiu-jitsu, and Lucie Pudilová doesn't really do anything but box and clinch. I think I gotta favor Pudilová just because the fight starts on the feet. The thing is I really don't know what the quality of Pudilova's ground game is. So yeah, it's Moras will pull guard. It's the weird thing. Judging these matchups in like women's bantamweight, where the sport at times still feels like it's like 15 to 20 years behind the other divisions, not even just men's MMA, but even behind like women's strawweight.
Yeah.
It is women's bantamweight. It feels like the women's version of men's light heavyweight, where it's like, oh my God, this is 2006.
Yeah.
And so like guard pulling kind of works with women's bantamweight. And that is like Sarah Moras pulled guard on Ashley Evans Smith, a wrestler you would think who would want top position, and got a first round submission. So yeah, that might work. But Moras is also like really not a good striker. She rushes into the clinch. I'm going to pick Moras. If Pudilová were a more venomous boxer, if she could put a little more behind those straight shots, kind of maintain the distance and really run Moras into some hard 1-2s, then she could very easily win this fight.
Sure.
And I think that it's possible that Pudilová could have made improvements like that. It doesn't take much to take a fighter like Pudilová, where I think a lot of the right ideas are in place, and say, all right, here's how you're going to throw a hard 1-2. Here is proper form for those punches.
She's fighting out of the Czech Republic.
Right. Yeah, I think it would take like a change of training camp, or at least a change in training mentality to do that. And until I have evidence of it, I guess I'll take Sarah Moras. But like this is going to be two completely different fights happening simultaneously.
Yeah. She's also just not Moras isn't a great athlete either, but Pudilová is just not a very strong athlete. And
yeah,
I mean,
she's an okay takedown defender, which is why I'm 10 picker.
Yeah, but I think it's the fight that's worth looking at here is the Jessica Andrade fight, and realizing that Moras is very happy to stand in and swing hard with people. And she was able to even successfully pull guard on Andrade and get her to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrade is a much better fighter than Pudilová. A smaller fighter, to be sure, but Pudilova's tendency to just rush the clinch and even like look for trip takedowns that she's not very good at getting, but will off balance her.
Yeah.
I think it sets her right up for somebody who's just gonna grab onto her and dive to the mat.
Yeah, I guess my base expectation for women's bantamweight should be rather than like, oh, these people are going to make decisions based on what's happening in front of them. Generally, the rule at women's bantamweight seems to be these two are going to try to do their one thing as hard as possible right away. And yeah,
and
Sarah
Pudilová
Moras
especially seems like she is stuck in the I will do the one thing I do as hard as possible. It just unfortunately happens to be that mean mugging is the one thing she does as hard as possible.
I mean, there's an outboxer in her somewhere. There is an outfighter in there that it just like it really takes like the opponent giving her the fight she needs on a platter for it to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Odds on that fight. Moras is the slight underdog. Opened at plus 145, adjusted down to plus 134, is currently at plus 140. Pudilová opened at minus 175, adjusted up to minus 160, and is currently at minus 170. There's no reason these odds should be anything other than dead even at best. I would favor Moras slightly just because I think that Pudilová won't stay off the ground with her at all. But there's no reason Pudilová should be any kind of favorite in this fight, I don't think.
Seriously though, like Pudilová is right in this fight as long as she just defends takedowns.
She's in it, certainly. It's why I think it should be even.
Yeah.
But
okay, yeah. I'm with you.
Anything other than even just seems to be like ridiculously misplaced faith.
Anything other than even implies that people should be betting on this fight.
True.
Which they shouldn't be, so it should be even.
Brings us to a flyweight bout. Roberto Sanchez versus Joby Sanchez. And
Joe Silva's sense of humor lives on.
Seriously. So my thoughts on Sanchez are that he's a really aggressive top control wrestler who fights with a game that doesn't.
Sanchez, on the other hand.
Yeah. I thought I could do this. I thought I could pull this off, but I'm not.
You cracked almost immediately.
I know.
We got to work on our deadpan, Zane.
I know. All right. Reality. Roberto Sanchez kind of has a game that makes it's like it's a game built for like a lightweight. Like he kind of plods forward, throwing these like single big power shots, gets himself off balance if he tries to do more than that. Doesn't take punches obviously all that well. It has a really aggressive like press you against the cage to take down game, and then he tries to lock down positions and move for submissions and all that. And it's just very much not how flyweights tend to fight and win.
I mean, you say he looks like a lightweight. If you want to see his game at lightweight, Jared Gordon is on these same prelims. It's quite similar.
Jared Gordon even might fight at a higher pace than Roberto Sanchez.
He does. Yeah.
And I don't like Joby Sanchez has problems. He's not a great athlete. And that's the biggest thing, really, honestly, is just he's a kind of mediocre athlete. And at flyweight, you can't be a mediocre athlete. But nothing about Roberto Sanchez's game strikes me as the kind of problem that Joby Sanchez has. Sanchez is actually like kind of like the Hawaiian stretched out Hawaiian flyweight, tall, thin Hawaiian.
Louis Smolka.
Louis Smolka. There we go. Thank you.
The Last Samurai. All you had to say was The Last Samurai, and I would have got you.
Yeah, there you go. Then, well, you might have said fucking,
Hawaiian Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise in a Tommy Bahama shirt.
Yeah. Anyway, Louis Smolka, kind of like Louis Smolka, Joby Sanchez, like even as a lesser athlete, can be a very competitive scrambler and grappler. You know, he's never lost by submission.
Mm-hmm.
And his only losses are to much better and faster athletes. And otherwise, like, he's a decent, crafty striker and a good, pretty solid fundamentals wrestler and all that. And he just strikes me as faster than Roberto Sanchez. So I feel like Joby Sanchez will be able to scramble his way out of any grappling that Roberto does, get to his feet, and land all the better strikes. Might not have the power quite like was it
Joseph
whoever,
Morales?
like Morales, to just put Sanchez away with one shot. But I wouldn't be surprised if it looked like repeated versions of that fight over 3 rounds.
Yeah. The one thing I would add is that I think Joby Sanchez does have one issue other than just limited athleticism, and that is decision making. Like, it's getting better with time as he gains experience, as you would expect decision making to improve with experience. But even in his most recent fight against JP Bays, I think they were pronouncing it, even though it looks like Bays, he kept insisting on wrestling, and I don't know why. Maybe something in the exchanges told him that he needed to continue engaging in the wrestling in order to wear Bays out, or that it would have been he would have given up a takedown to disengage or whatever. But he was in there against like a quality wrestler, a collegiate wrestler, who immediately pressed the takedown. And as soon as he was managed to scramble free, the first 3 times he managed to extricate himself, he immediately dove on a counter shot. And like, that's the kind of thing, is this is a style matchup that I think heavily favors Joby Sanchez, but his style doesn't always work the way it should. Yeah. He's not always using his style to its fullest extent. So, you know,
I also saw that, though, and I saw him against a very good wrestler, and it's the fact that he was able to keep scrambling and like get through those bad spots that he would put himself in, or, you know, even like get some takedowns and stuff, that makes me see, like, with Roberto Sanchez, it's like,
true,
he should be able to scramble through Roberto Sanchez's lockdown control game, which, like I said, it just doesn't feel like something that makes sense at flyweight.
Well, the thing is there are a few flyweights who have had pretty good success with lockdown games. Like, I would
insanely good, fast athletes.
It's true.
Sanchez isn't fast. Like, there's like a fight where Sanchez took the back on somebody, and he like stepped over to take the back, like step one leg and then the other. I was like, I mean,
even Oscar Pichota is out here jumping on people's backs, you know?
Exactly.
As a middleweight.
Like Lucie Formiga, who's also not the world's greatest athlete. He's like a cut above the very elite athletically. But his back takes are a teleportation. Yes. You know?
Yeah, that's definitely something. And Sanchez is not a great athlete, but he is quick. He's flighty. Yep. So yeah, it's definitely a style matchup that favors him. I am a little concerned about Roberto's top game. If Joby he does a great job of never resting and always continuing to push the scramble, but often with fighters like that, that's kind of the metagame. And sometimes fighters run out of ideas when they suddenly are locked down.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I can't scramble. And then they just start second guessing everything, and their fundamentals fall apart. So there's not a huge risk of that happening here, but I have my eye on it. My pick is Joby Sanchez, though.
Yeah.
Sanchez by unanimous decision.
Let's see. That was all right. Good. Sanchez is Joby. Sanchez is the favorite at opened at minus 110.
Unironically done it a couple of times.
I know. Sanchez is the favorite, opened at minus 110, adjusted down to minus 130, and is slowly trended down to minus 136. Sanchez is the underdog, opened at minus 120, so it's actually opened at dead even odds, and adjusted up to plus 104, and slowly slid up to plus 111. So Joby being the slight favorite, I think he could be a little more of a favorite, frankly, but Roberto did, he got like an LFA title on his way up and all that, so I can see why there's a little hype on him.
Yeah, that's all right. And I'll say before we move on is that I will really be missing Mike Goldberg's presence when this fight is happening. I need Goldberg to call the two guys with the exact same name fight.
Yeah, it does. It does feel right, doesn't it?
Yeah, missed opportunity.
All right, that brings us to a welterweight bout: Brian Camozzi, Geoffrey Neal.
You know, I was really hoping for something out of Brian Camozzi when he signed with the UFC. It's like durability issues out of nowhere, where it's like he just can't take. Well, yeah, not literally out of nowhere.
I know,
like,
but I was gonna say that I think it's something other than durability necessarily. I think it's athleticism, and then being a really tall fighter suddenly, who's suddenly he didn't, because he had a ton of speed on a lot of the regional fighters he would face.
Yeah,
and suddenly without that speed advantage, being a tall guy who just like stalks forward into the clinch and is not really that strong or fast is just getting him lit up.
Yeah, I think Brian Camozzi is like a bizarro Luke Rockhold.
Yeah,
like Luke Rockhold spent his whole career having a really easy time using his frame to its fullest advantage. That nobody was inside his space. They were on the end of his kicks, on the end of his punches. He could be as wild and reckless as he wanted, because people were very rarely inside his reach. And so now we see latter day Luke Rockhold, when like super elite middleweights get inside his reach, he freaks the fuck out because he didn't spend enough time getting comfortable with that idea. And Brian Camozzi never adopted a style that was based on, I mean, his style used his height. He likes to push the clinch and throw those knees from the collar tie, but his reach was never something he really invested in, like trying to maintain distance, trying to keep people at bay. And now, like, he really needs that. He really could have used a long, stiff, stay the fuck away from me jab against Chad Laprise, for example, you know, like where he was technically in that matchup in a lot of ways against somebody else who's not an astounding athlete, but who was just able to speed their way inside. And Camozzi didn't have the reflexes honed to stop him from doing that. Yeah. So yeah, here against Geoffrey Neal, like
hands of steel.
Yeah, love it with the Z. I like how you pronounced the Z on hands. Geoffrey Neal is like, I like what I see from his boxing. I like that he probes and pulls and sets up and and hunts different angles with his power shots after the jab. His record definitely suggests to me a fighter who doesn't necessarily know how to manage his energy. We have him winning 3-round decisions over fighters who are considerably worse than him athletically and skill-wise. And we have him losing most other times when it goes outside the 3rd round against decent opposition, whereas most of his finishes are 1st-round finishes. So like there is definitely a chance here for Brian Camozzi to survive and put some work on Neal in the later rounds. And Camozzi's got great stamina. He can push a really serious pace, and he is a dangerous striker when he gets his momentum rolling. He's got great kicks. He's got good long punches when he chooses to use them. And like I said, he's very dangerous in the clinch with his knees. So there's something there for Camozzi, but he's going to have to survive a really dangerous 1st round to do it. And I don't know. It kind of feels like a coin flip to me. So I'm going to go with Neal because I think he might be riding high on confidence after winning a big fight on Dana White's show. And Camozzi's confidence might be a little shook at the moment, having just lost his first 2 UFC bouts via knockout. But it does feel like a coin flip. Definitely a winnable fight for Camozzi.
Yeah, I definitely get the feeling that if Neal doesn't end this quickly, Camozzi could light him up, especially because Neal tends to just stalk forward with his head up on like really wooden and just throwing these power shots that are like they're better than arm punches, but they're not way better than arm punches. Yeah. He looks like a dude who has gotten away with being way stronger and more powerful than all of his opposition, and has all the bad habits that come with that.
He looks like somebody who has watched boxers and has like modeled the way he approaches the swagger off of boxers, like the way Bernard Hopkins would like hop step forward and just like look like he was right there. But the little subtle details of how like Hopkins was doing that behind his shoulder and was like leading with his feet and was like honed in on what you were going to do and ready to react. That's not there. It's the look of a boxer without the actual substance per se.
Yeah. So there's a big chance that Neal will come in, especially because Neal likes to do like high amplitude takedowns and stuff like that. There's a chance that Camozzi could submit him off his back because I mean that's the other good bad thing about Brian Camozzi is he's a very decent guard grappler, which gets you almost nowhere in the UFC.
Yeah, but occasionally it's a nice surprise.
But Jared Gordon is bad enough, like technically, that it could come up. Like I wouldn't trust Jared Gordon to be like, oh yeah, he's got a great top ride and an ability to maintain control on the ground. You know, that doesn't.
You mean Neal, right?
Or yeah, not Jared Gordon. Sorry, Geoffrey Neal.
Geoffrey Neal, I like that.
Geoffrey Neal. Sorry, I got confused for a minute. But yeah, I wouldn't like nothing about Geoffrey Neal's game suggests, oh, he's going to be great in a top ride situation and maintaining control on the ground. So there's a chance that Neal will come in and try to throw Camozzi down and end up getting submitted. There's a chance that he'll come in, get in the clinch, and eat a huge knee because he just has his head online and he's just pushing with like both his arms in a way that's really going to set you up to eat a huge knee. But in the meantime, Camozzi's just going to be this like stick with a target at the top of it, wading in to really like Neal seems like a dude who doesn't have to hit you that hard to hit you really hard. You know, you watch the knockouts he gets, and it's kind of like you kind of like hit that dude with like the side of your wrist or something, or like kind of like karate chopped him or something, and he just fell down, and you're just like, oh god, that.
He definitely seems to have naturally heavy hands. Like it's like the way Conor McGregor knocked out Dustin Poirier with some weird cuffing shot just by the ear.
Yeah,
Neal lands quite a few of those.
So that and Camozzi already like getting lit up by a couple of dudes has me picking Neal, but it's a well booked fight because it's a very unstructured power puncher against somebody who can be hurt but has a lot better idea of how to fight for 15 minutes.
Yeah, and if Camozzi has made just some significant progress technically, then it's like a fight he can definitely win if he just fixes some of the problems he was facing up to this point.
Neal is the favorite, opened at -145, adjusted down to -206, currently at -207. Camozzi opened at +115, adjusted up to +170, is currently +168. And that brings us to a lightweight bout, Jared Gordon versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. And this will be an interesting fight as long as Ferreira's cardio lasts. Because Gordon, I mean, I remember I picked against Jared Gordon last time out against Hakran Diaz because I really thought that Diaz would, he was more technical, and we saw that. And I thought he'd be able to control the tempo, and he absolutely could not do that at all, even a little, and it just broke him in the end.
Gordon
Carlos
truly
Diego
fights like he just doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah. Carlos Diego Ferreira is not more technical than Jared Gordon and has no ability to control the tempo really at all.
No.
But he's wild and unpredictable in a way and fights at a higher pace than somebody like Hakran Diaz. So it could take longer for Gordon to assert his control over the pace of the fight, just because Ferreira, we even saw against somebody like Olivier Aubin-Mercier, he'll just like throws out a random spinning back fist with a lot of speed and power on it that lands flush and hurt Aubin-Mercier. Like Aubin-Mercier really thought he could just win that fight behind a jab, a long hook, and some kicks. And Ferreira's like, nah, if you don't want to grapple with me, I'll just go nuts and throw whatever I want, whenever I want. And that'll make an interesting matchup with Jared Gordon. I got to pick Gordon there because Gordon, I think, he pushes a better pace and he pushes it longer. He can probably grind on Ferreira a bit standing in ways. I don't think he's going to take Ferreira down. He might, and that would be a mistake. Ferreira's actually a pretty legit grappler. But he can just keep pushing him back and keep striking with him. And as long as Ferreira doesn't knock him out, which, he doesn't have enough structure to his striking to knock out anybody that's not named Ramsey Nijem, frankly, who, had a notoriously poor chin.
Yeah.
And so it should just be Jared Gordon getting the win off pace and volume.
Yeah. I don't really have much to add to that. It's kind of counter a lot of what we'll want, which is pretty interesting. I think he got some craft to his striking. He looks really wild, but if somebody told me, I don't think he is. I'm pretty sure he's not. But if somebody told me like, oh, he's an Andre Dida guy, I would probably believe them. You're like, okay, yeah, like Francisco Trinaldo hasn't always looked pretty, but like he knows his range, or like our beloved Sergio Morais in the same way, like he's got an understanding of what he's doing, even if the moves all look janky and ugly. He knows his distance. He puts combinations together, and he's aggressive when he counters. And Ferreira has some of that. Like he's a pretty dangerous counter striker because he will just start swinging 3 or 4 punches in a row in response to you overcommitting and coming in. And then on the ground, like his ability to counter grappling, I think you can just look at the statistics of the fight with Olivier Albin Mercier and have an idea of how he counters that approach. Albin Mercier got 1 takedown, I think, of like 5 attempts. And on the 1 takedown, Ferreira got 1 reversal and then 4 passes. It got some really good work done off of Albin Mercier's 1 takedown. And Olivier Albin Mercier is a legit grappler.
Yep.
So Jared Gordon he's going to have that pace advantage, but it's going to take a while for that to pay off. And until he gets to the point where Ferreira is too tired to put up much resistance, Ferreira is going to be putting up a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
So I really like this matchup. I think it's going to be super exciting. I think Ferreira would have to be more dangerous, as you said, to turn those opportunities into a win, but you never know. So
yeah, Gordon, in the past, Gordon has liked to try to play like a takedown grind wrestling game as well, where he can put his pace on somebody on the ground. And he's not a good wrestler. He's not a great wrestler. He's just a dogged one.
Yeah.
And so if he tries to do that on Ferreira, if he's just confident, because he obviously has a lot of confidence of like, I'll just fight the way I fight and you have to deal with it. So if he's confident and just is like, oh, I'm just going to go take this guy down if the opportunity is there, then he could put himself in a lot of trouble. But I think he's also very happy to just have a pressure boxing game against somebody where he just throws and throws and throws and throws.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Odds on the fight. Let's see. Gordon is the favorite, opening at -175 and basically slowly dropping to -258. Ferreira opening at +145, adjusted up to +187, and now at +208. So, Ferreira's coming off a USADA suspension.
Yeah, we didn't mention that. It's been quite a while since his last fight. 2016, I think, was his last fight.
Yeah. So, I can see why the odds are long. Gordon's a fighter that I like the fundamental style that he's pushing of this high pressure, high energy, high paced fighter. It's going to win him a lot of fights. But the technical side of Gordon's game is not there.
Yeah.
And he's going to pay for it badly at some point because he's just going to walk on to somebody's much better striking over and over and over.
Yeah, he's like Justin Gaethje-esque. And like
without the technical depth.
Or the huge power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he's more like a Jake LaMotta of MMA, where he's like, it doesn't hit hard enough to like just put you away. So he just has to do a lot of work and put a lot of work on you, but it makes him super fun to watch.
Yeah. Should be a great fight to watch because of that. All right. That brings us to the main card now in a lightweight bout. Sage Northcutt, Thibault Gouti.
Sage Northcutt, if he looks anything like he did in his last fight, is going to blast Gouti in the first round and knock him out. That's what I think.
Yeah, it's a good test for Northcutt because Gouti, unlike Quinones, who really just wanted to sit outside and try and play Sage Northcutt's own game, but worse.
Yeah.
Gouti will actually just go out and try to pressure Northcutt relentlessly with boxing combinations. But Gouti also he bets on the idea that in combination he's going to be able to hit you cleaner than you hit him. Like that's really all that he's betting on. Not harder, not faster, just cleaner. And you know, even in his fight, his most recent win against Andrew Holbrook, he got hit almost as much as he hit Andrew Holbrook. It was just that he could hit him cleaner. And Andrew Holbrook has really bad posture and a really bad chin for taking strikes. And it worked for him that time, but against Chad Laprise and against everybody else Thibault Gouti's faced, it has not worked.
I think like the fight Gouti had with Anton Quivanen just before getting into the UFC, that was like his last hurrah. Where, like he had a war with Quivanen where they both knocked each other down and hurt each other constantly, and it's like now he gets hit and is just done. Like it really, he seems very, very chinny based on the shot that Packalin landed and the shots of Laprise. Like it's like one shot, he takes it super clean and just is out.
I just think it's just the step up in competition, the slow step up in competition. Sure. Regionally, guys couldn't hit him at all. And you can see he was getting a lot of submissions too. So for a guy who likes to box a lot, he was probably coming up through some regional competition that just did not have any kind of well-rounded game at all. And then he starts taking steps up in competition where people can actually hit him with reasonable accuracy. And suddenly the fact that you just walk forward with your head online, like unmoving, trying to throw volume, and you don't have a great chin means that you're always betting like, am I going to get hit this clean and knocked out this time? Or am I going to, and I think he looked technically a little sharper against Holbrook, but he still got hit just as much. And
yeah, and he does seem to like anticipate those hits. He seems to kind of flinch and lock up and just like, it's like, we're just going to throw at the same time and we'll see who gets the better shots in. I will say, I like that this is how they're matching Sage Northcutt.
Yeah.
You pushed him too far. You forced him to make a decision about turning his career around and getting himself on the right track. And now you're giving him time to get comfortable with that new track. And I like that.
If Northcutt were a worse athlete, I'd happy to pick Gouti in this, honestly. If he were just not if he weren't the athletic specimen he is.
Yep.
But Northcutt being as amazingly fast as he is, it just means that Gouti is going to have so much trouble stalking forward and landing the punches he wants while getting hit like he does. So, yeah.
Especially mean Sage. That was the biggest thing in that Quinones fight, was that Northcutt was like mean and taunting and like he was scary. He really felt in control in a way that it never seemed like he had before.
Yeah, that has a high and low side to me. That performance has a high and low side. The high side being Northcutt really kept control, stayed calm, stayed collected, picked all his spots, was a little mean about it and all that. But he also never really pulled the trigger in a way to put away an overmatched opponent. Like, he just kind of like let the shots land as
I'm okay with it. I like when fighters get work. I like when fighters take a matchup and they're like, all right, I'm going to spend 3 rounds working on all the shit I've spent this training camp learning.
True.
I'm okay with it for now.
Yeah. So anyway, we're picking Northcutt. It would be there are chances if Gouti, like, to his credit, and unlike Quinones, Gouti will just stalk in and try to land shots. He will throw combinations and try to hit Northcutt clean. And that'll be interesting to see as long as it lasts. But I just don't think he has the speed to make it work.
Yeah.
Odds on that fight, Northcutt is a sizable favorite. Opened at -245, adjusted up and down to -273, and is currently out at -295. Gouti opened at +197, adjusted up and down to +230, and is currently at +234. So, yeah, I'm actually all right with that. Part of me feels like it's a little long because Sage has had trouble with mediocre talents, frankly. I mean,
we've only had one fight of him looking like he's actually starting to fulfill his potential, and he has otherwise struggled way more than he should have.
Yeah. Actually, I would just say that that's long. The Quinones fight, it really was him just fighting a worse version of himself. And otherwise, you know, the dude who struggles with Enrique Marin and Cody Pfister.
Still, I will say that had Sage Northcutt fought that version of himself earlier, he very likely would have lost. Like he might have gassed because it was a close fight where he couldn't finish the guy. He may have, you know, like there's any number of ways it could have gone wrong. The fact that Northcutt stayed very calm and just perfectly controlled the bout all the way through was new.
Yeah, that was good. I'm still picking him here. I still think he should be the favorite. It is just, we do also have to remember that Northcutt is not far removed from getting clubbed and subbed by Mickey Gall, who then got handily out grappled by Randy Brown.
Right.
All right. That brings us to a featherweight bout. Steven Peterson, Brandon Davis. This is going to be a fun, high-paced, low-level action fight. I think this is going to be the fight for Brandon Davis that the Bochniak fight just did not end up being.
Yeah, like how we expected Bochniak to look.
Yeah. Peterson only really fights one way, and that's going straight forward. And he'll throw a couple of rote combinations on his way into looking for a pretty rote takedown where he works a pretty unexciting top game, but he's incredibly dogged and tough and will just keep going after stuff and going after stuff and going after stuff until something works.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also how Brandon Davis fights, just more with better defense and with higher pace. Also should be noted, Peterson he looked small, or he looked like the smaller man, not small, but he looked like the smaller man against who did he fight in the Contenders series?
Benito Lopez.
Yeah, Benito Lopez. And that was at 135.
Mm-hmm.
And this is now back at 145. Where, like, for a dude who kind of looked like the less athletic, weaker guy in the cage in that fight, going up a division, back up a division, just doesn't strike me as going to be something highly successful.
Yeah.
Davis is just going to have to mind his P's and Q's on takedown defense. That's really the big thing. Because he's going to have somebody who's stalking in straight lines, looking to throw hands in combination exactly the way Davis wants, exactly in the ways that they're going to allow him to slip and throw volume and all that. It's just on the end of it, Peterson's going to look to get in on a body lock or get in on his hips and just try to, like, lift him and put him down. And as long as Davis can defend that, he should have a win on his hands. If he lets that push him around, then it'll be a very competitive fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in pretty much every way, it feels like the matchup that both of us expected the Kyle Bochniak matchup to be.
Mm-hmm.
All the good things we had to say about Brandon Davis there still hold true. He is going to have really what we learned from that fight. We learned two things. One, Davis did a pretty good job of stopping Bochniak's takedowns. which is a good sign for him here. And 2, he really struggles and looks flat when the opponent just uses a lot of lateral movement and never lets him set his feet, never stands in front of him, never really comes after him except in sudden burst, and then they're back on their bicycle. He just kind of turned off because Bochniak wasn't engaging him, and so he just followed him around and kept following him around and kept following him around. But that's not how I have ever seen Steven Peterson fight.
It's all Peterson. It should also be noted is like, even though he's only 27, he's like 10 years into his career at this point.
He's kind of set.
Very likely just the fighter who he is at this point.
So provided he doesn't have a Bochniak-esque turning of the corner and looks like the guy he did in his last fight in this one, then Davis's reach advantage, his volume striking, his nice movement and iffy, but his defense is actually good when he's not fighting somebody who's just leaping in with these big explosions. When he's actually in like a boxing exchange, pretty good defense. He knows where the head movement goes after the punches. He knows to be unpredictable and mix up how he's responding to attacks. And
he has that kind of lazy, confident, slipping defense where it's like, oh, in an actual like exchange, then you're slipping and making the right moves. And when you're just sitting outside watching something, waiting, then you're just sitting there with your hands down like, oh, I'll be able to slip. Well, oh, shit, I just got hit with a head kick.
Yeah. Like Lando Venata. Like you don't have, like you're in the rhythm of the exchange, so there's not this feeling of urgency. But like when something suddenly happens out of nowhere, you still respond with this ease and you just get clipped. So yeah, Brandon Davis, I think, is going to have a big output and striking advantage here. I'm picking him by decision. Possibly a TKO. Don't know.
Yeah. Could be. Peterson's tough, but Davis does throw a shit ton of volume. Davis is the favorite at the moment, opened at -125, adjusted down to -189, and is currently at -185. People opened at -105, so these guys opened pretty even, adjusted up to +163, and is currently at +154. I'm happy with those odds. They could be a little longer to my taste. Even if Peterson is really successful with this takedown game, I just don't see enough structure or any technical advantage anywhere that would have me winning the fight, or picking him to win the fight.
Yeah.
But Davis isn't like he's not a marvel of a fighter, as we saw in the Bochniak fight. If you change things up a little, he's suddenly just stuck for ideas entirely.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And Peterson's grimy as hell. And it tends to be close because he is very game and he will just force exchanges if things aren't going his way. So
yeah, so the odds are probably about right given those factors. Welterweight bout next: Thiago Alves, Curtis Millender. Let's see, I forgot where I am.
It is me.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this matchup. It's kind of weird.
You know what the thing is? It's not a bad matchup, but not for any good reason.
Yeah. Yeah, clearly the idea here is to set Curtis Millender up with like a name win. He has been doing exciting things. Not even on the regional circuit really, but like LFA, Bellator, just second tier top promotions. He has been doing impressive things, mostly head kicking people. And so, the UFC loves those exciting knockout artists. They bring him in. They want to give him a win over somebody whose name still kind of means something. Thiago Alves. Thing is like there are a lot of things I don't like about Curtis Millender's game. That I would say he would be. I would definitely pick Thiago Alves if there were like one more thing wrong with Millender's game, like just one more systematic error. Like if he didn't move laterally, if he didn't have a good habit of taking a backward step and then immediately sidestepping, if he was the kind of guy who backed up straight and really relied on kicking range to get his work done, I would pick Thiago Alves to be able to close him down and get him out of kicking range and beat him up. But as it is, like Thiago Alves would have to close the distance really explosively to do that, to be able to cut off that lateral movement, and maybe he can. Like Thiago Alves' leg kicks are still fearsome, and Millender really leaves that front leg out there when he's getting away. And you know, like Thiago Alves is still so good. This is the thing. Like we saw that in the Patrick Cote fight. He's just older, but and worn out, but he's still so good as a technical fighter. There's still so many things he can do that no one has ever tried to do to Curtis Millender. And so, like, I could see this going exactly like the Jordan Meehan fight, where it's not going great for Thiago Alves, but there's so many big openings in Millender's game that Alves can just slip those counter shots or those nice little pot shots in there and use superior technique to win the day. The real problem is that, like, I still think Thiago Alves is best as a counter puncher in terms of really landing his effective shots. He's got the leg kicks at long range, but otherwise it's really counters in the pocket and in the clinch. And the clinch is going to be hard to use the way Alves likes to use it against a fighter as tall as Millender. And the counter punching is going to be hard to use against a guy who very rarely steps into the pocket to throw punches, who is mostly just firing kicks from range and waiting for you to kick and then trying to counter with a kick of his own. So I'm going to go with Millender just because of the style matchup. I don't think there's an easily available strategy for Thiago Alves to win this fight, but like I said, like there are a lot of technical gaps in what Curtis Millender does. There's a lot of like just kind of assuming you won't pursue when I'm getting out of range. It's just waiting for a more experienced fighter to teach him a lesson about doggedness, about just sticking on him. Somebody is going to give him.
Well,
problems.
they already have. I mean, it's not like he's never lost.
True.
A dude like Fernando Gonzalez submitted him in the third. Brennan Ward submitted him. Like,
yeah. It's been a little while since those fights.
But yeah, well, it's been a couple of years. But that was only like 2.5 years ago. I'm picking Alves, and the thing is, like, Millender was one of the guys that we put on our scouting report when we were scouting people a couple of years ago, just because he's such an obvious athletic specimen. Yeah, and just being that kind of athlete is going to get you somewhere. Mm-hmm. But technically, he just doesn't look like a fighter who's improved at all. Yeah, he hasn't really changed. No. Like, you look at his fight with Nick Barnes, and he was kind of getting beat up for portions of that fight. You know? And the biggest thing is, like, beyond his tendency to throw these wild, just super showed punches from range, where he'll just, like, step back and just Todd Duffy it. The big problem is that he actually does, like, he has a good counter game to kicks. He has zero counter game to boxing whatsoever. If you just push forward and throw hands at Curtis Millender, all of his defensive reactions outside of stepping to the side are bad. Yeah. It's all footwork. It's all get out of range. And he doesn't even do that effectively. Yeah. And that along with his poor takedown defense and his poor grappling and just like the ability for him to just show his strikes from range so clearly, I think it's just all too much to have me pick against Thiago Alves. Because Alves, the thing is, too, he's still the only knockout loss on his record after that John Fitch up kick is a doctor stoppage against Carlos Condit. Mm-hmm. Like, he's still incredibly tough. For sure. He's still not, he looks more fragile than he used to be, but he's still not a guy who just gets hit once and put out. No, he's like in a prolonged, if we compare him to like other aging fighters, he's like in the prolonged Brad Pickett versus Tomas Almeida phase, where it's like cracks are showing, but he's still clearly very good. Yeah. But he's been in that phase for like 3 years. Where Millender lands one kick and it puts Thiago Alves away. That is there's a very reasonable probability of that. But until I see it, Alves is just so much more technical, and Millender has so many gaps in his game that I just can't pick. Like, if I can't pick Alves to just not be able to pursue this fighter at all.
Yeah, you kind of swayed me because, like, when I was talking about like Pudilová and Moras before, it was like, well, my expectations for decision making have to be low in this division.
Yeah.
But like, what are my expectations for decision making on Thiago Alves' part? A very experienced, very well-rounded fighter who has fought for titles, and can he, if there is an obvious game plan just set out before him, can he take it? Probably, yeah. Even if it's not the way he really fights best, like, yeah. But I don't know. There's still also times like Thiago Alves didn't look good in the Jordan Meehan fight. There's still moments where he looks really flat.
Yeah.
And
but Jordan Meehan is a much more technical striker than Curtis Millender.
Yeah, and a more aggressive boxer, like getting in the pocket and I'm gonna stick with Millender just so that we have an opposing pick. Because last time we agreed on every fight, and I don't want that to happen again.
And I let you sway me against Dong Young Kim.
Yeah. I told you, man. Anytime I convince you, it's the wrong choice.
It's true.
Never again.
All right. Thiago Alves is the favorite in this fight. Opened at -210, adjusted up to -155, and then dropped back down to -168, and is currently at -168. Millender opened at +170, dropped down to adjusted down to +130, back up to +142, and is currently at +140, where the odds have pretty much evened out at +140 -170 or so. I think that's about right. Alves is much better. He's technically better everywhere, but Millender is a huge freak athlete with knockout power, and Alves is well past his prime, still technically better everywhere than Curtis Millender, but you got to take that into account. All right, that brings us to a lightweight bout. James Vick, Francisco Trinaldo. And this is a fucking tough fight for me to pick. This is mostly because, in large part, with Trinaldo, Trinaldo has been a fighter I've had trouble getting a beat on, really, for a while now. Just because his game is just so like, it's like a 7 everywhere. And so it's really hard for me to take that and to be like, well, what does he do well? I mean, he kickboxes pretty decently. He throws a lot of power. He pushes aggressively, decently. He can counter all right. He'll hit takedowns when he needs to. He can be taken down. He can grapple some when he needs to. He can be out grappled. Like, it's just, there's no like one part where I'm like, oh yes, this is the Francisco Trinaldo game right here.
Francisco Trinaldo is for us what like Danny Garcia is for boxing fans. He just like is solid.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can almost convince yourself he's not very good.
Yeah.
But it's just because he's just unremarkably solid everywhere.
And James Vick, I just don't like the way he fights. That's really what it comes down to with James Vick. I keep watching tape on him. I'm like, what is it about this dude? And beyond the whole Lloyd Irvin shit, which, I try to let fighters, when I'm watching fighters, I try to let them be whoever they are in the cage and, put the outside the cage stuff aside of it.
Yeah.
But I just don't like the way James Vick fights, because it's always on the back foot in ways that, and like flinchy on the back foot, like not really active defense so much as like, oh, something's coming at me, and like, okay, he's calmed that down somewhat over time, but a lot of it is really just he's so big and long that he can afford, like, being flinchy is enough to like defend stuff and see stuff coming. If you can pull back and like put an arm out in front of somebody's head, as they try to throw punches at you, likely if you're 7 feet tall at 155 pounds, they're just not going to be in range to hit you.
Yeah, I called James Vick on this week's episode of Heavy Hands. I was like, oh, he's like the Rockhold of the lightweight division. Like he's insanely big for his division.
Yep.
And it was pointed out to me that he's actually just the Rockhold of the UFC because he's the same height as Luke Rockhold. Yeah. At 155, he's 6'3".
Yeah.
That's absurd.
It is. And so, you know, he's kind of this flinchy defensive fighter. He's not a very good counter puncher because of that, because he's flinchy, because he's just trying to like throw arms out and like keep you off. He doesn't counter punch all that well. And then every now and then he explodes off his back foot with one or two strikes that are pretty well placed. And because he's got like all this snapping power coming off of these monstrously long arms, they crack people. Or he lets you like rush in and bull in on him and like, you know, he is just trying to like make it messy enough as you rush in on him that you dive in on a takedown and then he jumps on a submission. Like it's rarely any sustained effective offense from James Vick. It's a, you know, like the fight he had with James Duffy, a lot of that was just neither of them landing anything for long stretches. And then every now and then Vick would like come out and pump out a 2 or 3 punch combination that would just really bloody Duffy up at the end of the round. And then in round 2, he just kind of had this moment where he just like bursts forward and cracks Duffy, and that's it. And it's effective for his height and his size, and it's something that he's continued to perfect over time. But it's still like you just can still see the same fighter in there who got wrecked by Beneil Dariush because Dariush was able to just step inside and throw over looping power punches over his flinchy defense. And Trinaldo certainly could do that. Like, Trinaldo loves to do this double jab left hand that is really well placed and well timed and has a ton of power on it. He stunned Kevin Lee with it. He stunned Jim Miller with it a couple of times. He, you know, he's just been able to find it on a lot of fighters. This big setup left hand that he likes to throw and time. And he's very like relaxed with it. He just kind of bounces out at range and, you know, kind of like shows it a little. And then he'll step forward, jab, left. And it works. It's pretty. If he doesn't get that, though, the other thing with Trinaldo is that because he has this kind of relaxed demeanor from outside and because he always steps in with power, he gets hit and he can be caught clean by things. I mean, that's why he lost to Kevin Lee in a fight he was clearly winning, is that he just kind of gets out there and he gets a little relaxed. He gets a little into rhythm. He's trying to set up these big power shots to wade in, to jump in on, and he can just be kind of caught cold with stuff. And part of that is that he doesn't mind getting caught with stuff because then he'll throw high power counters back. He'll get tagged by something being relaxed, and part of it's kind of like that Mark Hunt thing where you see Mark Hunt just kind of like strolling away casually from an exchange, and he's waiting for you to step in and hit him so that he can fire off a power uppercut in counter. And, you know, Trinaldo's not Mark Hunt. He's not quite that technical. So if he gets caught cold doing that, it's not, you know, or he also doesn't have Mark Hunt's chin. So if he gets caught cold doing that, then betting on it is not always a safe bet. And it puts two fighters at odds where they both have the exact right way to hurt one another. And to, you know, where like James Vick's occasional like jumping in with power punches while otherwise staying on the back foot leads right into the kind of game where Trinaldo pushes forward with pressure looking for power, looking to counter, and not minding getting hit clean by things in the meantime. The big thing that's swaying me to pick towards Trinaldo is that, frankly, James Vick's takedown defense still sucks. And he was good at getting back to his feet against Joe Duffy, but Joe Duffy is not as good he's not as athletic and strong as Trinaldo is. I mean, Trinaldo's kind of a hulk of a lightweight as well.
Yeah, in a very different way. And he's absolutely willing, if he thinks he can take you down, to just, instead of bullying in behind a big power overhand, bullying in behind a power double leg and pushing you to the ground with that. Vick is tricky off of his back. He's a good grappler. He's submitted people, and Trinaldo's not always the safest grappler. But I also feel like people now kind of get that about Vick. Like, there may have been some surprise to that earlier. And I don't think that Trinaldo's as passive as somebody like Abel Trujillo has become. So I'm willing to pick Trinaldo's overhands and his ability to hit double legs and take Vick down as the possible difference makers. But there's going to be danger for him everywhere doing this. And there's going to be danger for Vick doing exactly what he does. Like, staying on your back foot, having kind of flinchy defense, and then betting on the ability to like explode into a couple of big shots sets him right up to get hit by the kind of overhand shots that Beneil Dariush hit him with. So, yeah,
I'm leaning very slightly on the Trinaldo side of things, but only very slightly.
Yeah, well, you laid out all the reasons that I am also having a hard time picking this. Like I made a pick on heavy hands for this matchup because it's obviously one of the more enticing matchups in the card, I think. And I picked James Vick, and it is only I have only started to second guess that decision more and more since I made that pick, because it's a well matched bout, and there are a lot of ways I think it could go, and a lot of that depends on like how deep does James Vick do a lot of James Vick's new skills go? You know, like he flashed some really great looking boxing against Joe Duffy, and in fights before that. But Duffy was by far the best boxer that Vick has ever showed that kind of boxing skill against. But the thing is like Joe Duffy's not really a pressure fighter. Joe Duffy is not really accustomed to walking people down and working his way past the end of someone's reach. And Francisco Trinaldo has done that to more people. But I don't think Francisco Trinaldo's ever, let me take a quick look at his record, actually. Like, who has he ever fought that compares physically to James Vick? Yancy Medeiros, the most hittable man in the world?
Yancy, see, this is the thing. Yancy Medeiros is like the beta James Vick. That's the thing too with like James Vick's style of fighting. Like, I watch Yancy Medeiros fight, and it's like an even flinchier fighter who backs up and then fights in these single bursts of offense. And it's exactly
we've never seen Yancy Medeiros like. We have never seen him use the style of boxing that James Vick was using in his last couple of fights. So we have never seen Yancy Medeiros is literally like, I'm going to explode across space with a punch and hit you with a combination, or I'm going to back up and get hit by everything you throw at me.
Yeah,
and Vick has
Vick, that's why I mean, like, it's a much worse. It's a beta version of the same basic style fundamentals of like backing up, being defensive, and trying to just stay away from pressure, and then bursting forward with like single openings that you see.
Yeah, see, like I really want to pick Trinaldo now. I'm gonna stick with Vick for consistency because
that's a very like Vick's grappling. If Trinaldo takes him down, Trinaldo's ability to get hit while he's looking for counters and trying to like set up a counter and let himself get hit a little.
And Vick's ability to use those reactions, like to use, I'm slipping and now I'm looking for the counter. The way he did that against Duffy was really impressive. The way he used that pawing jab to get Duffy to move his head into the uppercut. there is just a lot of composure behind what Vick is doing nowadays, and because his technique is really strong, stronger than it's ever been. But yeah, I still don't know how he, like, essentially, in a lot of ways, this is what Pat said. In a lot of ways, it's like a run back. It's the closest approximation of Vick's loss to Beneil Dariush.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, how do you deal with a similar matchup this time against like an aggressive southpaw? And yeah, I'll stick with Vick because I think he's definitely a different offensive fighter than he was when he fought Beneil Dariush. And he certainly seems more confident than he had even in fights up to that point. And like he's no longer sort of aimless in his bouts where he's just sort of taking what his opponents give him. He is actually taking opportunities from his opponents. He is using that length the way length should be used to seize the momentum of the fight. But it is very similar to the Dariush matchup stylistically, and Dariush fucking flattened Vick. So we'll see. I'm gonna stick with Vick, but I'm worried about it now.
It's a really well booked fight. Like, it's a fight, like I say, it's a fight for me between two guys that it's taken me a lot longer than I feel like it should have to figure out. Just because, like I say, with Trinaldo, it's just sort of this like do everything pretty well game where I'm used to keying in on specific things of like, okay, this is the success of this fighter lies in their ability to do this one thing in this fight. Or to, their ability to they have a style that flows into this progression. Like, this is what they're trying to do. Whereas with Trinaldo, it's kind of like, well, he's got like 5 things he's trying to do, and he does them all decently, but not amazingly.
Yeah. I will say one thing I think Trinaldo does very well, just to give a little praise to my boy Marcin Duba, is recovering mid-fight.
Yeah.
Because he's old, and we saw in older fights, like in a few years ago, he would gas a lot, and he never really gasses anymore.
No.
And it's because he recovers, like he breathes while he's throwing. He takes a few moments to reset, Dominic Cruz style, between exchanges, and it recovers really well. And he does that actively. He makes sure that he's not exhausting himself.
With James Vick, I just don't like that fighting style at all. Like the
well, that much is clear. You don't like James Vick's style. That you said that enough. Yeah,
I just don't like it. But it took a while to click. Like watching it, because I had to watching it and Yancy Medeiros back to back. I was like, oh, that's what I'm seeing. I don't like this. I don't like the way this. I don't like this method of fighting, even if it's functional. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Vick is the favorite, opened at -245, adjusted up to -190, and is fallen back slowly down to -233. Trinaldo opened at +175, adjusted down to +158 or so, and is risen slowly back up to +188. I honestly think this should be really close to even. I think it's a really interesting, difficult style matchup for both guys.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
And that brings us to our co-main event, heavyweight fight, Derrick Lewis, Marcin Tybura.
I hate this fight. I just hate it. It's so dumb. It's so heavyweight dumb. I don't know. For some reason, it's just my current headspace regarding UFC events, I think, where like we were going to preview these for heavy hands, and I looked at these and I was like, I would much rather talk about Vick Trinaldo than I would Lewis Tybura, because heavyweight is just so depressing unless like Curtis Blades or Francis Ngannou is fighting. Just this matchup reminds me that these are supposed to be top contenders. Yeah, this is supposed to be some sort of elimination bout. And I imagine Marcin Tybura fighting Stipe Miocic or Derrick Lewis fighting Stipe Miocic, and I'm like, why should I care?
I still want Derrick. The fight I wanted, and it makes less sense with every passing year, is still Derrick Lewis versus Alistair Overeem.
Sure. Yeah. That sounds like a stupid fucking fight. I do kind of want to see that, though.
Because it's like a much, much better technical fighter who's never had a good chin against somebody who just hits really hard.
Against King Hippo.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Marcin Tybura is durable. And that's something he's got going for him. And he can work at a pace and put his shots together. And he's got some footwork. But like physically, there are a lot of things going Derrick Lewis's way here. Like Tybura's style of head movement is awful. It still is, like, at least he does it now. And he used to just do like leaning away sort of abstractly. At least he will time his leans and his ducks in between shots and then continue putting a combination together after. He'll move his feet in conjunction with his head movement. There are layers built into his game now that were not there before, but it still technically is so questionable that somebody with Derrick Lewis's power is a huge threat. Like Marcin Tybura leans away once and eats one right hand on the chin and it could be all over because Derrick Lewis hits that hard. Derrick Lewis has just as many technical flaws, more in his game.
Much more.
More. There is no structure to Derrick Lewis's game at all.
For a dude who has huge physical advantages, he fights like he has no physical advantage.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and on the one hand, like some of his physical advantages come at the cost of other physical disadvantages, and he just cannot. He weighs too much to maintain a pace. You know, I think it's just physically exhausting for him to move around, and so there's a reason you don't see Derrick Lewis bouncing on his toes and or using anything resembling any kind of footwork. But he hits really hard. And he will let time just slide by. Like that is still Derrick Lewis's greatest attribute, is allowing the fight to elapse, knowing that at any moment he could end it, and staying calm and just waiting for that. I think I'll pick Marcin Tybura because he actually puts work on people, and will probably look to tie Derrick Lewis up in the clinch and stall him out to avoid a lot of that. And once Derrick Lewis slows down, he still has the explosion, he still has the power, but if he is forced to fight at a pace, fatigue really has an effect more than it does even on most heavyweights. He is visibly affected by fatigue. So I'm going to go with Tybura as a simple process versus no process pick. But there's so much wrong with Tybura's process that you can see why I don't give a shit about this fight. Like, it just sucks. There's no analysis to be had here.
I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun because Tybura wants to be especially like with the kind of fight that Derrick Lewis is going to give him. I think Tybura wants to be like a more high output fighter. Like he's going to want to kind of pursue Derrick Lewis. And Derrick Lewis, if he had taken the next evolution of fighting smarter, basically Derrick Lewis fights just smart enough that against heavyweights who don't have a great chin, he will win because he can wait them out to land the one or two huge shots he needs to end a fight. But against any heavyweight that's really like elite heavyweight tough, which Tybura is, his game is just like none of it is even built to take advantage of what he does well. Like Derrick Lewis has a high output kicking game. That is what he has structured his striking style around. A dude who hits harder than anyone else in the heavyweight division, other than Francis Ngannou, has structured his striking around a high output kicking game.
It's just, like most times when I look at a fight and I'm like waffling and clearly having a very hard time deciding, as in the case of Vick Trinaldo, it's an indicator that it's a really well-matched fight and therefore an interesting fight. And while I can't say that this matchup isn't well-matched, because it is, I have just as hard a time like waffling on it, it just fucking sucks. Like, it's not Vick Trinaldo. It's a fight in a stupid division between two guys whose games don't make sense. I don't know. I hate it.
I'm picking Tybura pretty easily. Just off the idea if he doesn't get knocked out, he wins. There's very few ways that he loses a fight where he doesn't get knocked out against Derrick Lewis. And Derrick Lewis could knock him out, but he has not made any of these structural changes to go from, like, it used to be that he would lose fights to even heavyweights with bad chins because he didn't know how to pace himself and he would just get taken down and overwhelmed and whatever. He learned that. He took that step to beat those dudes.
That's the last step he took.
Against heavyweights who have chins, he's exactly the same fighter, and it just doesn't work.
That is, like, Derrick Lewis made a serious concrete improvement to his game. He added a process of some kind to his game when he decided, I'm not going to go nuts swinging. I'm going to calm down and wait for my moment. And that is seriously the last change. The last evident change he has made to his game.
Yeah. Odds on this fight: Lewis is the underdog, opened at minus 110, adjusted up to plus 113, is currently at plus 121. Tybura opened at minus 130 and has fallen steadily down to minus 157, rising back up in the last day or so to minus 146. That brings us to our main event: Donald Cerrone versus Yancy Medeiros. And really, for me, this is a pick of how washed do I believe Donald Cerrone is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he's anything other than totally washed, if he can survive more than one or two hard shots, I have to pick him against Yancy Medeiros. Because Medeiros, all of Medeiros' defensive habits are god awful. And
what defensive habits?
Yeah, and he gives ground like crazy. I mean, the things that saved him in that Cowboy Oliveira fight are that Oliveira's offense is still wild and unstructured, and he gassed himself out, nearly knocking Medeiros out, so that not only did he give Medeiros opportunities to, like I say, like Vick, Medeiros has that thing where he wants to, he backs up, he gives a lot of ground, and then he looks for his spot to throw one or two shots. And if they land perfectly, if they are perfect shots, and he's good at timing them, then you get the knockout he had over somebody like, who was it that he, over Eve Edwards, where like he's just losing that whole fight, and then he leaps in with an uppercut and knocks Eve Edwards out.
Yeah. Or shit, almost the Trinaldo fight, where he did that in the third round too, after being utterly destroyed by Trinaldo for 2 rounds before then.
Otherwise, he is utterly destroyed for just long stretches of every fight. And that, like, Cerrone has certainly never been the most durable fighter ever in the world, but he is now a less durable version of the not the most durable fighter in the world.
Yeah.
He's never handled pressure well, and that has not really changed. But otherwise, he's still, and maybe he's even a step slower than he used to be. That certainly seemed to be there in the Darren Till fight. He just did not look like he could keep up for speed at all. But otherwise, he's still a good, solid combination kickboxer who it takes more than one shot to finish. Like, even the Darren Till loss, that was like, he wasn't knocked out. He just got hurt and he couldn't recover. And the ref stepped in. It was a TKO, It wasn't like just, oh, I got hit and I'm out now. I'm done. Same, and with the Masvidal fight, like, that was kind of a sniping. But Medeiros just doesn't have any of the consistency to put together the performances that either Masvidal or Till put together. Like, both Till and Masvidal were able to apply pressure. Masvidal worked a body kicking and jab game to get Cerrone's defenses out of position enough to the point that he could land the shots that hurt Cerrone, and then eventually in the next round knocked him out. like for Medeiros, it's really just going to be like, do I land a kill shot? And if I don't land a kill shot in this moment, I'm going to go right back to losing this fight. And I don't think Cerrone's that far gone. He doesn't, and Medeiros doesn't pressure at all. Like, his style is built around being on the back foot and giving Cerrone space and time to put together his combinations, to be confident, to see things coming, and to work at a pace and a range that he likes. And even in like the Robbie Lawler fight, when Lawler couldn't knock him out early and got into a less pressure-based style after that and took a round off. But even in the third round, where Lawler just kind of like worked dipping in and out of the pocket and working a consistent but not high pressure style, like Cerrone was still comfortable in that fight. He didn't never get rocked or hurt late in that as that fight went on. And I have to look at that and say, you know, Medeiros can't swarm him effectively, and so he's going to lose until, you know, unless he just absolutely puts a one shot kill on Cerrone.
Yeah, three key factors in this one are Cerrone's doneness or lack thereof. You know, is he medium rare or is he well done at this point? Medeiros' pressure, something he can do in bursts going after people, but something he has not consistently done as like a way of approaching his opponents. I mean, I think there was one fight where Medeiros just really went after someone with like a methodical pressure approach, but for the life of me, I can't recall what fight it was.
Maybe the McDessie fight?
No, he didn't in that one. Kind of kickboxed with McDessie for really long.
Joe Proctor. No, even then, Joe Proctor, I think, backed him up a lot.
Yeah, he's kind of like he's just kind of like this boxer punchery kind of, I can do everything, just kind of go with the flow of the fight sort of fighter. And then what was the third thing? Oh, Medeiros' power is a concern. Medeiros, he has, or not even that, Medeiros' reach combined with the fact that he's got some power. It was pointed out by Nick Zardiashvili on the latest episode of Heavy Hands that Cerrone, like you did say before, Cerrone hasn't made any, he's never become better at dealing with pressure, and that's not 100% true. Like, we have seen at welterweight some the counter takedowns have been big. And then, you know, since way back in the day, Cerrone has been using that step knee as a response to people who come forward recklessly. He does have answers. But the thing that really, really troubled him against Darren Till, this was Nick Zardiashvili's point, which I think is a very good one, is that Darren Till had a huge reach, the likes of which Cerrone does not typically face. He's definitely used to being the taller, longer fighter, and he pressured using his reach. He did not rush into the clinch. He didn't come into Cerrone's range at all. He stayed at long range, but kept the pressure on Cerrone from there, kept the jab in his face, kept the long left hand at what would normally be a range at which only Cerrone can really land, and usually with kicks. Darren Till was hitting him with punches. And for Yancy Medeiros to have a similar effect, to make Donald Cerrone look like he did like back in the Nate Diaz days, I think he would need to do what Darren Till did. Donald Cerrone is no longer the guy who got easily outboxed by Nate Diaz at long range. I think you kind of have to combine that with some pressure for it to have that effect. And if Yancy Medeiros is not consistently pressuring, then he is otherwise spending a lot of time at Donald Cerrone's kicking range. And he is a fighter who is profoundly susceptible to body kicks in a Matt Brown sort of way, where that's
in a Donald Cerrone sort of way, even.
Sure, yeah, except that in this matchup, Donald Cerrone is the guy who throws really good body kicks, and Yancy Medeiros isn't. He does have a spinning back kick that's okay, I guess, but so I think that he's going to be playing at Cerrone's kicking range. That's a game that Cerrone's very comfortable with. There are definitely going to be moments where, if Cerrone's chin is becoming more of an issue than it has been in the past, Medeiros' power, his willingness to just explode across space with straight punches and short combos is going to be dangerous. But in terms of like a whole approach to the fight, It feels like a style matchup that favors Cerrone.
Odds on it, Donald Cerrone is the favorite, opening at -160, jumped up to -132, and has drifted back down to -153. Medeiros opened at +120, adjusted up and down to -102, and has drifted back up to +127. I like that. I don't think you... I think that Cerrone coming off his string of losses, his questions about his durability, Medeiros being able to take a hell of a shit kicking and come back with one moment in a fight that can change a whole fight. Those things can't be overlooked, but it should still technically be Cerrone's fight for every minute he's not getting knocked out.
Yep, pretty much.
All right, on that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give us a like on YouTube, thumbs up thing down there, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com, DOTCOM, all spelled out. You can find all the latest Bloody Elbow shows, videos, news, analysis, all that stuff we do week in, week out. I've just got a new show that came out yesterday called Bloody Elbow's Cinema Classics.
Cinema
MMA Classics. Whatever.
It's one of those that really works in text.
Yeah, it's a text name.
Yeah.
But, with John Nash, where we're talking about all the best classic combat sports movies out there in history. We'll be doing those hopefully somewhat regularly. I'm not quite sure the schedule will be on yet, but check out the most recent one.
What are some enticing examples of movies that you'll be discussing?
Well, we started out, first episode was the setup. We'll probably be talking about Fat City, The Harder They Fall, Night in the City. We'll get into some stuff like Bloodsport and, some of the other, more modern, Rocky and some of that kind of stuff down the road. What?
Raging Bull? Surely?
Yeah, Raging Bull. Stuff like... We're going to start with a lot of the classic, a lot of the, really good classic films, and then maybe move on to some of the less good but still very fun ones. Anyway, you can obviously also listen to Heavy Hands this week, and we will be back next week to talk about UFC on Fox, Emmett versus Stevens, which has all the look of another Fox card that will tank terribly for the UFC.
Yeah, so, you know how Jacare Brunson 2 was boy, this is the worst Fox card yet. This one's
this is the exact same. This is par.
Yeah, it might be even somehow less enticing because the main event it feels like nothing.
Yeah, that's true.
UFC nihilism. They need to start bringing back the subtitles just for comic effect.
This Fox card does honestly look worse than this Fight Night card we just talked about. I like this Fight Night card a lot more.
Oh, well, looking forward to that next week, folks.
Yeah, so that'll be us next week. And we'll also have Heavy Hands, If I Did It, Care Don't Care, all the other stuff we do week in, week out. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.